Welcome back. This is History 1122, second half of Western civilization. In our last meeting, we talked about what we mean by the West. In this session, I want to go into a little more detail on two concepts that dominate this course, historical significance and historical context. I organize my lectures around these categories, and the questions you'll get on your exams and your quizzes will quite often deal with context and significance. So I wanted to spend a little time talking about it. Let's start with historical context. Historical context is the big picture. The individual events and people that we talk about throughout this course, all of them fit into a broader scope of history. That broader scope of history is the context. If I were to ask you what's the context of Martin Luther King, what was he a part of? What was the bigger thing of which he was merely one part? Civil rights movement would probably be the best answer. If I ask you the context for the Tet Offensive, it took place during the Vietnam War, so that's the context. If I ask you the context for Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974, Watergate would be the context. If I ask you the context for the magic bullet that inflicted all those wounds on Governor Connally and President Kennedy, that would be the Kennedy assassination. The magic bullet is a part of that bigger topic. So context is the big picture of which we place those events and things that we talk about in the course. So I want you to become familiar and anticipate questions on context and when I discuss context in lectures. I want to give you three examples in a little more detail. In addition to context and significance, of course, we'll spend a lot of time simply characterizing historical events, that is, describing them. So I want to give you some examples here of both characterization, historical context, and historical significance. And let's start with something that everyone's heard of. I probably haven't read it. It's right there on Google. It'll pop up on your screen. That's the Declaration of Independence. So let's characterize it first. Let's merely describe it. To characterize something is the simplest thing you can do in this course. Let's face it, a 7-year-old can describe. You can characterize the car you drive. You can characterize the clothes you're wearing or the breakfast you had. So let's characterize the Declaration of Independence. We know when it was published, July 4th, 1776. We still shoot off fireworks and eat hot dogs on this day. We know who wrote it for the most part. It's Thomas Jefferson. We know where it was written, in the city of Philadelphia. We know what it is, a document listing grievances that the American colonists have against the English king. So these are mere descriptions. One way to think about characterization or description is to ask yourself the questions that they teach you in journalism school. Who, what, why, where, and when. If you can answer these type of questions regarding an historical event, then you're characterizing it or describing it. Now, let's talk about significance for the Declaration of Independence. Why is it significant? What are its consequences? So you could form a sentence like this and say, the Declaration of Independence is significant because. Now, when you fill in that blank, you're answering that question. What are the consequences of the Declaration of Independence? Well, it establishes the United States of America. That's obviously significant. Think about the role this country has played in history over the past couple of centuries. Now, let's ask an entirely different question of the Declaration. What is its context? The Declaration is a small part of a much bigger series of events that are happening in 1776. That, of course, is the American Revolution. There are many, many, many events that are a part of the American Revolution, and the Declaration is one of those. What's another example that everybody's heard of? Pearl Harbor, the attack by the Japanese in 1941 on the United States. Let's characterize it. Let's simply describe it. We know the date, December 7th, 1941. We know the day of the week, Sunday morning. It's around 8 o'clock, I believe. Perfect time to carry out a sneak attack. The men are sleeping off those 12 beers they drank the night before, or they're in chapel. It's a good time to carry out an attack. We can further characterize it by casualties. I think we lost in the neighborhood of about 3,000 men that day. We could detail the damage done to the ships and the planes. That would be a characterization. We could describe the method of attack. The Japanese did not do this with infantry, obviously. They did it with airplanes, planes launched from aircraft carriers just north of Hawaii. So these are all simple characterizations, simple description. Now, what about significance? Why is Pearl Harbor significant? Well, it brings the United States into the Second World War, doesn't it? Prior to that, we had not been involved, at least not in a fighting capacity. Context, what is Pearl Harbor a part of? What's the bigger event of which Pearl Harbor is merely one part? And that's obvious. It's the Second World War. I'll do another example, and these are from American history to get you familiar with these categories. 9/11. Some of you guys remember this. We can characterize it by talking about the targets, the Pentagon, World Trade Center. A plane that went down in Pennsylvania was turning and heading back to Washington. Probably, I would guess, either the Capitol or the White House might have been a target. Casualties in the neighborhood of about 3,000, again. Method, hijackers, commercial airlines flown into buildings. We know the date, we know the time. So these are all simple characterizations. I've asked my classes to characterize the hijackers, and invariably I get hands raised and people say they're terrorists. And we have to sort of break that down. We've been hearing this word so much over the past decade or more that I don't think we give any thought as to what it means. A lot of students say that a terrorist is someone who attacks civilians as opposed to the enemy combatants. And this just further complicates things, doesn't it? If you think about the United States Air Force in August of 1945, incinerating 2 Japanese cities with atomic bombs, killing a couple of 100,000 Japanese civilians. So you see, we can get into murky waters here when we start tossing these terms around. I like to do it, though, because it provokes you to think about what you're saying, as opposed to simply sort of parroting something you've heard repeatedly. I've asked my students to characterize the hijackers, their nationalities, and you get the whole gamut. Where are these people from, these hijackers? We usually hear Afghanistan and Iran, Iraq, Syria, and so on and so forth. And of course, all the hijackers are from Egypt and Saudi Arabia, our 2 closest Arab allies. So again, you see that once you get past the sort of publicity or the talking points of these things, you get into complications. We can't invade Egypt and we can't invade Saudi Arabia. We did find 2 countries to invade, though, didn't we? So 9/11, characterization, now significance. What were the consequences? Well, we invaded 2 countries, right? Afghanistan and Iraq. It had domestic consequences. The U.S. airline industry was in turmoil for some time. Security is heightened. The Patriot Act is passed. So we have domestic consequences and foreign consequences. Context. What is 9/11 a part of? What's the bigger thing that 9/11 is merely one part? Probably the simplest answer would be the war on terror. That's the phrase we hear constantly. Terrorism did not begin with 9/11, nor will it end there. So I suppose that's the easiest context. So these are some examples of how the course is structured, how the lectures are structured. I'll generally tell you up front what the context is of what we're discussing, and then I'll generally tell you why it's significant, and at the end of the lecture, that significance will generally be repeated as a conclusion. And then in between, we'll characterize these events and discuss them in some detail so you have a little better understanding. So that's a good introduction to context and significance, and just anticipate those phrases as you hear them over the course of the semester. Thank you.